This episode of iFanboy is sponsored by GoDaddy.com. You can go there to pick up domain names, website hosting, and all sorts of other services. You can use the coupon code iFanboy to get 10% off your purchase. GoDaddy.com, the web is your domain. We're also sponsored by Netflix. With over 75,000 titles, no late fees, free shipping both ways, fast delivery, and plans starting from $4.99. For a free 2-week trial, go to www.netflix.com/iFanboy.
You know what's funny is fashionably, this book is way off. Everyone in this book is dressed like a moron. And that either means that they thought that's what cool people in Texas look like or what, but...
Hey, welcome to iFanboy, the video podcast from the comic book site iFanboy.com. I'm Conor. I'm here with...
Ron.
And I'm Josh. We teased this a little while ago, and we said we were going to do a whole show on Preacher. And so I made it all the way through reading them all again. Conor made it through reading them all again, and Ron says he's got it.
I flipped through. Well, we've all read it.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones that it's a must read.
It should be stressed as a reread. When I reread them just recently on a whim, and I was just struck by...
Well, let's back up and tell everybody what Preacher is before we...
Right. Yeah. Well, I was struck by the fact that it was the greatest thing ever, so I thought we need to come here and talk about it.
We need to convene and discuss.
Because the thing is, even if you've never read it, then we'll help you know about it, and if you have read it, you're going to be like, wow, they're not kidding.
Are we going to spoil this for people?
Try not to.
I think we should probably get the disclaimers out of the way. Let's get the disclaimers out of the way. So we're not going to spoil much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll try not to.
Yeah, we'll try not to. There are certain things that we can't get around not saying.
Right.
Also, if you're under 18
or 35, about. Yeah, it's not a kid's book.
It's not. This is for mature readers. So, kids press pause.
Not perhaps the culturally sensitive.
But you see, here's the thing. Not to get on this thing. I read this. I read some of this when I was still in high school, when it was coming out in issues and stuff like that.
You weren't allowed to, though.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. But I think so. Don't tell your parents.
Anyway,
I think they should be allowed to read them. Anyway.
So let's go. It's hard to do a quick pitch for Preacher because. For me, I think of it as unlike anything else. The basic story is...
Wait.
Okay.
Who does it? What's it from?
Yep.
Give them the basics.
Okay. This is the book that made Garth Ennis in America. I think it's safe to say. He wrote it, all 60-something odd issues. I think 60.
9 trades worth.
9 trades worth. Steve Dillon was a penciler on every single issue of the regular series. There were some spin-offs that are in the trades. And it came out from Vertigo. Interestingly enough, this came out from Vertigo Comics at a time, in 1994, I believe, when comics were just in the dumps.
Yep.
And so, this is this phoenix sort of that rises from the ashes of what was really almost a dead comic book industry.
Yep.
And
even more so came from Vertigo, which is imprint of DC Comics, which we talked about in a previous episode, which up to that point was still kind of getting its legs in terms of what it was doing as an imprint. And the SANDMAN was the big hit at that point, and this was unlike anything else being put out by that line.
And that's sort of where we started. This is unlike anything else ever, and I can't where people will do this meets this. Yeah. There's too many things.
Well, I mean, and what's a testament to this is that now in this day and age, it'll be like, oh, it's like Preacher with this. You know what I mean? It's like become one of those
and that
things.
Is never true.
See, I can understand that assessment because there's lots of different things going on here. But I read all 9 of these in a space of about 3 weeks before to do the show, and it is deeply and truly a Western.
Yes, that is the underlying element.
At the end of the day,
a modern Western.
At the end of the day, it's a modern. It's a tried and true Western story from beginning to end. There's lots of different things. There's war stuff. There's international intrigue. There's all kinds of different. There's relationship stories. But at the end of the day, it is a Western.
Absolutely. Jesse Custer is a preacher at a small town in Annville, Texas, and he's got a flock of 200, and he's in the church, and there's a big explosion, and everybody in the church is killed except for Jesse. This happens in the first few pages of the book. On the way out of town, he runs into his ex-girlfriend, who he hasn't seen in a long time, and a guy named Cassidy, who turns out to be an Irish vampire. Jesse finds out that he has this power, the Word of God, where when he tells anybody anything, as long as they understand English, to do something, they compulsively have to obey.
And when he's
him.
using it, not at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has to, his eyes get red and the letters are red.
The letters go red.
And he gets all intense looking. Yeah. And so he decides that he finds out something about God, that God has abandoned his post. And he, being basically a true Western cowboy hero says he's got to go make things right and make him answer for what he done.
So he's gonna go find God
and give him a talking to. He doesn't really say what. Like, I remember when I first heard about it, he said he was going to go kill God. That wasn't the point.
No, it wasn't. He
He's going to make him answerable to it.
He just wanted God to be responsible.
And what's interesting is that a lot of people wrestle with religion and things like that. And he was this, kind of Southern preacher and that sort of thing. But by getting this power, that then acknowledged in this universe that God exists. There's angel
Jesus
characters. There's a saint.
Exactly.
There's the saint of killers walks around.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to note also before we get too deep into this is that it's a book called Preacher. It's about a preacher. God's a character. Some of it takes place in heaven. Some of it takes place in hell. It's got religious undertones, but it's not a religious book.
Yeah,
No.
It's more of like just these characters are fictional characters, and it doesn't. I don't think there's really much of a commentary on religion.
No, not
it really isn't.
It's just God and religion exists.
Well,
That's it.
the main.
But it also isn't. It's not an affirmation, but it's not
No.
a rebuke either. But it's
But
just
Jesse Custer is a preacher, and he
Right.
is throughout the whole thing. He never
renounces.
He doesn't lose his faith.
Yep.
He doesn't lose his values that are associated with it.
Yep.
He's never not a preacher in this book, and that's important. He wears the collar the whole way through.
Yep.
no, he doesn't.
Well, he has a
Not
t-shirt.
by the end.
Towards the end.
After
Yeah.
the explosion, he doesn't wear it anymore.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's an explosion at the end. We blew that for you. But that's basically the setup, and that's all taken care of in the first book. Now, from there, there's this giant, rich story that involves world conspiracy and espionage and just silly, over-the-top. It's it's an over-the-top book, and that gets some people. And what I mean to say is, there's these big, nasty things that happen.
Well,
to
there's a lot
people.
of violence. And the violence is very explicit.
Yeah.
But it's done in a way that's over the top. That
It's
you
supposed
see,
to be humorous.
That you see, it's funny, but also it's like this is how bad this world is. And I don't know if it's because God is off this post or just because it's setting these characters in this world where you say this is a really awful world where awful things happen. So that things come out of this are almost more powerful because of the world they're in. But it's really bloody. And it's all very
Graphic sex.
people get shot.
Graphic-
Their entire skull explodes.
I tend to think of it though as it's a book that goes from lighthearted to heavy in strokes. Like it'll be at one point it'll be really funny and you're having fun with it.
Yeah.
Mainly because the main characters I think are extremely likable. You want to root for them, which is one of the best things he did because when things happen to those characters later that you don't know how you feel about, you are then put in a position to have to. You understand how the other characters feel. So if a character you've come to really like does something that you really dislike, you have to wonder, do I approve of him for that? Am I mad about that? Do I not? And I love that because that puts you in the moral gray area of people who are friends with those characters. That lets you understand what it's like to be in the story.
I think the personalizing of the characters is one of the whole length of the book. The consistency of characters, Garth Ennis' vision, and how the characters fuck up left and right.
Yes.
And the characters screw. They're in one book they're tight and they're friends and they've got this great Gone connection. Then a couple books down the road they're fighting and they're screwing each other over and then they're apologizing and moving forward. And it is, while it's kind of over the top in terms of the violence and stuff like that, I thought that was really realistic in terms of interpersonal relationships.
And that to me was the thing that I really related to. And I gotta say, this book actually emotionally affected me more than almost any other book that I can think of in terms of the characters. I'd get to points, and there's because it's a Western, everything is a little more melodramatic than it would be in real life. But there are points in the second book, Until the End of the World, which is basically Until the End of the World is a love affirmation that Jesse tells Tulip, who's his character. And when he says it to her at certain points, there's an emotional reaction. I don't know if I was like, wow, that's deep.
I like these characters. When I'm reading this book, I like reading it. I can't put it down. This is one of the first books, once you start reading in the trade paperback format, that I literally read the first one, ran to the store, get the next one.
Let me ask you this. Okay, when did you start reading this, or how did you hear about it?
Well, I heard about it when it was in issues in '94 when it came out. I had a friend of mine who was not right in the head, shall we say, and he fucking loved it. And he was like, "You've got to read." So I read it. I think I read issue 3 or something like that. And I was in high school. I was like, "Oh, that's all right." I didn't really. And then several years later, I think in the late '90s, I bought the first trade based off of your recommendation.
Right.
And then it was literally read the first one, ran to the comic shop, bought the second one, ran to Amazon, ordered the rest of the
We
lot.
all had that same
That's
experience,
funny because,
correct?
I'd always heard of Preacher, but I wasn't in high school. I wasn't reading Vertigo.
Yeah.
I just wasn't into it, so I never read those. But the late Dan Epstein, who was a comic journalist, he gave me the first 2 trades one day because we worked together.
Yeah.
And he said, "Take this home over the weekend. By the second trade, you're going to be hooked." And I read the first trade. The first trade's good, but the second trade's where it really
It gets
nails you.
Yeah.
And I came back into work Monday. I gave him back the trades. I went to Amazon. I said, and this is also the book that got me into trade paperback loving. Where I said, at the time, my inclination would be to go on eBay and buy the issues.
Which you did. You did that with Transmetropolitan.
Yes, because back then that's what I was doing. If I found a series, I'd go on eBay and try to find all the back issues. But this one, I said, you know what? These would look great on a shelf. All 9 of these would look kick-ass on a shelf. And I did. I ordered all 9. And then that's at once, and I just sat and plowed through.
And now that they changed the trade dress, they look even better than the ones that you bought. So.
Son of a...
Mine too. I was much the same. Actually, I read.
I need 9 new ones.
When I first, it was one of those things I've been meaning to read, and I went and I read. I think the first 4 of them in Borders.
Yeah.
Like I didn't buy them,
Nice.
and then I joined one of those sci-fi book clubs, and I got like 8 of them in a row.
What?
Yeah, seriously, where like you get 6
from the
books
magazines,
for free.
like the
Yeah.
DVD
I
club.
did not know about this.
I have no idea.
Book club?
No, but it was like
Not like
I
a
got
book club
like in the
like me
mail.
talking
I got
about
the
it, like
science fiction book club.
Columbia.
Right, like that.
Yeah, that would have been much better if you had like a book
Sitting
club that you
around
talked about comics.
I would love that.
Aside from us.
So, when he has sex with the sausage, how did you feel?
Did you even read the book?
But this was one of those experiences where I could not stop reading.
No, you can't.
And it's like you stay up late at night and you finish it, and there was really no low point. I'd say we talked about it in the Western show we did. Ancient history is a diversion.
Yes.
At the time, it slowed the story down. I wanted to know what was going to happen, but now going back to read it
No,
the
I liked
second
it
time,
just
I
as well.
really, really enjoyed it.
Well,
But
one thing this book does is it follows a story. Okay, Jesse's quest to find God, and it's basically one long road trip.
yep.
But about halfway through, he starts going back in time. First, there's a character called the Saint of Killers, who was literally the Saint of Killers. We spent almost the whole book on him, and we find out about a character named Arseface. We find out about his history. And then later on, we get Tulip's backstory, we get Cassidy's backstory, we get Jesse's backstory. And for me, that was great because I really wanted to get going with the story and find out how it ended, but at the same time, I loved the filling in, and it just made me anticipate the rest of the story even more.
And they really worked really well because the thing is, they've been dropping hints about the characters all along. And you got to understand, if you were reading this in issues,
I can't imagine what that would have been.
Mind blowing. Yeah.
years. And then so when they go back and they tell you about Cassidy's past, Cassidy the Irish vampire, like it all melded for me so perfectly. Where like the character that he had created from issue 1.
Yeah.
It perfectly encapsulated how he came up and what he became, and it was just you really get the feeling like he had an idea about the entire story as a whole from the very beginning.
This is, I think, where trades really are benefiting, because if I'm reading this in issues and then I spend an entire trade on Jesse's sojourn in a town called Salvation, I probably would have gone crazy, because that's 7 months of the main story. But as a trade, it's great because you can just fly through it.
Right. But to argue that, at the same time, I know people who are reading an issue that like this is one of the concept of the finite series. I think has really been kind of. Vertigo's been a trendsetter in that.
Yeah.
In that, like this series is going to run around 66 issues.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, around 66 issues. Like SANDMAN ran and ended. You know, Why the Last Man is going to end. Is these finite kind of collections. But I know people when they were coming out in issues were dreading the 66 issue. They never wanted it to end. They needed that monthly preacher fix.
And I can understand that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it does go in both ways.
That's not
Stranger in Paradise. I'd say,
exactly.
with
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
The thing about this, though, is that when I was reading through it, I got the sense of it being one complete story, and I love that. I love the planning that goes into that. In regular monthly comics, a lot of time, you can plan things out, but you've only got to do it for 4 to 6 months.
Right.
He had a 5-year plan in his head.
And this is where Vertigo has a line, and we've talked about Vertigo before, but this is where they really excel because they give them that
So
playground.
they do better than anybody else. Is they
But
let
not
these
everybody
guys
does
run.
that really well.
Right, true, yeah.
And then that was the one thing, and
I think Image has started to do that a little bit with
Ennis
some of
was
their titles.
pretty
where they're
young
giving-
when he started, so like I give him even more credit. Like
You can tell too, because it's a lot tighter at the end than it is at the beginning.
Actually, in that same respect, I thought that the pencils in the beginning, I was like, wow, he was really.
Steve Dillon's art, we should talk about, is almost
Yes.
as much of a. It is as much of a factor as the writing.
Absolutely.
I know for some reason I know lots of people don't like his art. I can't understand that, but it's art is art, and people will have different
From a
tastes.
storytelling standpoint, I've got to say that this is as crisp and as I never was once confused on a page. It's not boring. It's basic in a good way, like a cowboy movie, like a western, and so it fits in that ethos. One of the criticisms that Dillon gets a lot is that he just draws the same character.
I don't buy that at all,
These
because
characters are so expressive.
I was going to say every single person looks completely different in this book.
Yeah.
I do think that he put a lot more detail in the beginning.
Yeah, well,
in
you
the
can
first
see-
trade,
yeah.
the
There's a lot more.
there's a lot more
detail
shading
in
and
it.
detail and things like that, but it didn't. It didn't affect me.
But I wonder if that's his personal art style changing, because the way the last trade is drawn now is pretty much how he draws now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think that you see a progression going from that. We're spending really time to what he did towards the end of it, but he also was able to. It's a cartoony style, but it's not photorealistic, but it's realistic.
Yeah.
But he was able to handle both. The idea of the Jesse and Cassidy, that kind of traveling and kind of road trip, kind of real world things, and at the same time draw freaking angels.
Yeah.
And draw hell and draw heaven
God,
and
God.
something like that, and it was believable for some reason.
His style is deceptively simplistic.
Yes.
It
Yes.
looks very simple, and then when you really look at it, another guy like that, I think, is Ryan Otley.
Yeah.
Where you look at it first and it seems like there's a sparseness of line, but then when you really look at it, you see that things have weight, and they have the shapes are where they're supposed to be. His anatomy is excellent. All of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's deceptively simple.
And also, you're talking about a book where most of the time people are spent just walking around talking, doing whatever normal stuff, but then there's scenes of extreme violence that he captures really well. Even not just gun-toting violence, but there's a lot of fist fighting in this book.
And it's funny because I was going to say earlier,
And they've got power and weight to them.
But I mean, quite often this gets branded offensive because of the content, because there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of sexuality, a lot of kind of very holy shit, did you see that kind of moments, both in terms of violence and in terms of sex. But I think the deceptively simple aspect of Dillon's art downgrades the offensiveness of it. I mean, it takes a lot to offend me, but I was never offended by any of this. And because some of the ideas and concepts are so out there, but with Dillon's art drawing it, it almost balances it out somewhat.
The other thing about this is that, and we talked about this being a Western, and that has something to do with it. Is to Jesse, there's morality. Yeah. Everything that Jesse does is because it's the right thing to do.
Yep.
And he's doing the good thing because he knows he believes in it. And so the whole book is predicated on that.
Right.
It has to be the fact that whatever Jesse does, there's no gray ambiguity about Jesse. He never does anything that's morally ambiguous. A lot of characters around him does, but he always does the right thing. He's compelled
he thinks it's the right thing.
Right, what he has to. And that's a cowboy thing. There's the white hat, supposedly. Let me ask you guys, because clearly we're all excited. We have a lot of things we can say about it.
This is one of the few books, by the way, that we all collectively love.
Right.
Yeah, like this.
And a reread of it, I can tell you, did nothing but bolster my thought about it.
I loved it more on the reread than I did originally.
I really think this is maybe the best comic book story piece of work done in the last 10 years, 20
not
years.
good to read in public.
Well, it depends. What I wanted to ask you is,
on the train, I did a lot of this reading.
What is it that you really love about this series?
When we talk about the characters, by the end of the book, you are so intertwined in these characters' lives, and you really care about what they are doing, what they're saying, what's happening to them. The story is compelling and it's exciting, and there's a lot. I mean, he has a lot to say about the world.
Yeah.
Through Jesse.
Through all of them, really. I mean, he meanders a lot, and there's a lot to say about just the state of the world. This is such a chaotic world, and what it means to do the right thing, and how it's really tough to do the right thing sometimes and be the good guy. It's easier just to go along with everything the way it is. And Jesse's a guy that you really.
Which is storytelling crack to a guy like Conor.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's a Western. And my family's all from Texas, so there's something that appeals to me about that.
A little unknown fact about the Comanche.
Yeah.
So.
What about you? What is it that? Because I imagine you're going to be coming from a different place.
He likes the boobs.
I like boobs. No. Oddly enough, I've had my challenges and grips with religion. I'm Italian. I was raised Catholic, stuff like that. I don't actually like much of it. I really liked religion in this story, in this aspect, and the way of handling, both tying in with some of the conspiracy theories and kind of the rumors around that they're descendants of Christ and this whole kind of order around protecting.
What's the Grail conspiracy?
Yeah, exactly. So I love that stuff for some reason. But then also the idea of fuck you, God, I'm pissed, and I'm going to hold you accountable for it. And that ongoing mission across all 9 books that's the one thread that kept me tied in.
And he never once, was wavering on it.
Well, he got distracted sometimes.
Right.
But he got pulled aside and all this.
He always knew he had to do it, and even when he acted like he wasn't going to do it.
Right.
Like it turns out that.
And what I found most interesting is that Jesse, while he's a preacher and holds his faith, he's not like, prim and proper, and like he drinks, he smokes, like he's imperfect. He's an imperfect man, and he
lives according to his rules, though.
Yeah,
and according to his rules, he's
Yeah.
100% on.
Right, yeah, no, exactly. But the things that I feel as if religion now has become this kind of constricted
Sure.
thing. Like growing up, I couldn't curse. We couldn't do all these
Right.
things because that was, like I went into confession saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I cursed." Like, who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? Like seriously, And this kind of supported that thought.
Well, it draws that line like a man is judged by what he does.
Right. Yes.
And that's
because those who know me, I mean, I have a strong moral code as well, and I try to do the right thing and all that kind of stuff. I might do it in ways that people don't agree with.
And you curse like a sailor.
And I curse like a sailor, exactly.
Were you in confession all the time?
Yes.
How do you justify BitTorrent? Anyway, I think for me, there's a couple of things that really struck me is that I think emotionally for the book, his relationships. When you put Jesse, this isn't Jesse's story. I don't think, in my opinion. No. Jesse is the main character, but this is really a story about human fallibility, and I think for me that is encompassed in Cassidy and Tulip. Mostly in Cassidy. For me, Cassidy is the arc of this story where when you watch from what happens to him to what we learn about him to what happens in the end and the choices that he has to make, that's where a lot of the drama, and especially near the end of this story, comes from. Yeah. And he's a fantastic character to me because he is, in the beginning, what appears to be the best friend any guy could ever had. Oh my God, he's fun, he's loyal, he's true, he's with you, he's the best friend ever. And then, like anything, peel away the layers, you're going to see something ugly. Now, the dude's a vampire. Right. And there's a past that goes along with that, and Ennis pulls you both ways with it, where you see him in the worst possible light and the best possible light, and at the end you've got to make up your mind about him, and I just love that from a dramatic standpoint.
The whole Tulip thing. I was just like,
yeah, don't even see.
Yeah, I know.
I think, reading this book, I think one of the main themes is, maybe the main theme is redemption, that everybody gets a chance to redeem themselves no matter what they've done. And that is encapsulated in Cassidy, whether or not you think he deserves to be redeemed or not. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm very conflicted about him at the end.
Yeah. And you should
I don't want to talk too much about it, but
Well, that ties into a lot of people. I think one of the biggest criticisms of this book is the ending. And some people hate it, and some people, I personally, I thought it's fine. I didn't have a problem with it.
I didn't have a problem, and it makes perfect sense within the theme of redemption.
If you also read it from the very beginning, that end makes perfect sense from a narrative standpoint. And a lot of people, I think people didn't like the ending because, and I'm going to try to skirt around this.
Yeah, because we don't want to spoil it.
People didn't like the ending because it just sits weird. It's like, God, I don't know if I wanted that to happen. Right. But from a story standpoint, it fits perfectly, and it all goes together. It is a straight line from the beginning to the end.
I also think it has a lot. Your feelings in the ending might have a lot to do with how you feel about one of the characters' actions that goes bad, and I'm trying to not be specific here. One of the characters does something that you really don't like, and the way his final scene in the book. I think there's two ways to go with it. He could either pay for what he's done or be redeemed.
Yeah.
And the theme of the book is redemption.
Yep.
And now, if you don't want him to be redeemed, you may be unhappy with the ending.
Yeah,
right. But it all depends on how you feel. I'm very mixed about it. I like the ending, but the character, I'm not sure.
But what happens at the end? Like a thing happens, and we have to. But it's a Western, so heroes riding off into the sunset.
Yeah. That's not the thing that people.
I know, and that's not it. Yeah. But that's what the end of the book actually is.
Right. Yeah.
And that's. Yeah. Like you know that.
I remember when this last issue came out. I just remember people just like the anticipation for that last issue, and then what the payoff was, and the camp that was totally satisfied, and the camp that was. And I think part of the people who don't like the ending kind of would also, if you distracted them and talked about it differently, would argue that they just didn't want it to end. Like I think that's the big thing is that these are the kind of character kind of stories where this could have gone on another 66 issues. It could have gone on to 600 issues and 666.
But it couldn't have.
Well, yeah. But
I mean that's the thing.
But the connection at least I had with the characters is like I didn't want it to be the end.
And that's why it had to end. Yes. Because the thing is, there isn't a weak point in this. Yeah. And for me, if they were now on issue 142 and trying to think about situations they can put Jesse in, it's exactly. You're gonna ruin the legacy of the whole thing. What is there anything about it that you didn't like?
No.
I don't think so.
I would say that a weakness of it, and it's either it depends on how you look at it.
About it this way.
One of the weaknesses of it is that the story is predicated a lot upon the idea of there's a lot of coincidence that happens.
Yeah.
He leaves the town. He happens to run into so and so. At another point, he happens to meet somebody who he's very close to. Right. There's a lot of happenstance in it, and the thing is, from the very beginning, you have to be able to go with it. If you don't get over that, you're not going to enjoy it.
But I think that goes with any kind of story, both movie and comic as well.
It's true, but there's a world that's set up in the beginning, and as long as you go with that from there, I mean, it's not realistic. In that sense.
Totally.
And you have to, if you buy into this world, you're going to be just fine.
Yep.
Besides that, I don't really.
It's hard pressed. I mean, like there are big ideas, there are crazy shit that goes on. There's people on here that people in the book that you almost, if you try to explain it to anybody, it just makes no sense. It just seems like nonsense, and that could be seen as a criticism. But Ennis and Dillon make it work somehow, and from sex detective to the the religious zealots kind of grouping to the angels and like all these kind of things, like. It's just mind-blowing when you read it, but it just all when you're in that universe and you throw out your preconceived notions, it all fits and works nicely.
I just want to reiterate that if you're the kind of person that's not going to be able to handle angels doing cocaine, then don't read this, because we are heaping a lot of praise on it, and I do think it's one of the best works that's ever been published, but you have to be able to accept
Northeastern liberals.
Accept that. No, you have to be able to accept that these are characters in fiction. They're not. There's no commentary going on.
It really doesn't make any commentary about religion.
It's
just
just
commentary about different types of people and how they use their beliefs.
You've got to accept that these angels and God and devil, all these people that show up are characters in a fictional work.
They're also he's making the point that whatever the deities above us happen to be, they're fallible.
Yeah.
Just like everything else. They're based on humanity's based on them, and they're fallible. Therefore, we're fallible, and all that stuff.
I just want people to know that going in. I went into this, and I'm very.
This is not for the politically incorrectly timid, I suppose. That was not a real phrase.
No, I get it. I mean, for the the shaky ground.
And don't give this to your mom if she doesn't like seeing violence on TV.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you're really looking for something that does comic books, that it's just taking the graphic novel form. This doesn't work for me in a movie. This doesn't work for me in any other form. No, I know that, but for me, this is it works perfectly as a comic book, and it's paced and the whole thing. It's just a comic book done right.
Now this it's HBO, right?
It's in development.
It's in development at HBO for like an ongoing series. Would you be able to watch it?
I don't know.
See, that's tough.
I would definitely watch it. But
I would definitely watch it because I'm curious. But I would.
But I want to talk about this right now as a work of graphic fiction.
Perfect.
That is almost perfect. I can't think of anything better than this. If you haven't read it in a while, I highly recommend you go read it again.
Yeah.
We
love it.
Is there a really new trade dress?
Yeah, there's brand new trade dress. And what's funny is that the sides all match.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really good. So if you are a fan of Preacher and want to share us with your thoughts or contradict something we said, you can email us at contact@ifanboy.com, or you can give us a call at
1-888-FANBOYS 326-2697. Tell us your thoughts on Preacher or anything else.
If you want to try to dissuade Conor from repurchasing them all because
they're not going to. They're going to persuade me because that's.
Or if you'd like to buy Conor's slightly used trades, go to ifanboy.com. There'll be a post about this episode, and also go to revision3.com/ifanboy, and there's a link to our forums where you can discuss this episode as well as other episodes. Great discussion goes on there.
It's true.
It is true.
Clearly, we're biased about this book.
Hell's a coming.
It's all coming.
It's fucking brilliant.
All right, here's what happens in the end.
Everyone's like, no, you're Cassidy. I have no other part to play. Because everyone's like, no, you're the fucking pale.
Except Cassidy's cooler than me. I don't think you could pull off a sleeveless denim jacket.